A mysterious pendant in a 1907 photograph held the key to a century-old secret that would forever change how two rival Italian families understood their bitter feud. And before continuing, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. In an old mansion in the San Telmo neighborhood of Buenos Aires, the air heavy with history and Buenos Aires humidity guarded secrets that had remained hidden for more than a century. It was March 2024 when Eduardo Martinelli, 52 years old, found himself sorting through the belongings of his recently deceased great-aunt Esperanza, the last survivor of her family generation. The house, built in 1895 by Italian immigrants who arrived during the Great Migratory Wave, preserved in every corner testimonies of the prosperity that the Martinelli family had achieved in the grain trade at the port of Buenos Aires. Among worn leather trunks and wooden boxes that smelled of mothballs and time, Eduardo discovered a photograph album carefully preserved between yellowed tissue papers. The first image that caught his attention dated from 1907. According to the handwritten annotation on the back, the photograph showed an elegant woman of approximately 25 years, dressed in Belle Epoque fashion. Her posture was refined, with hair gathered in an elaborate Edwardian hairstyle, and her dark silk dress reflected the economic prosperity of the upper middle class of Buenos Aires in the early 20th century. However, what really caught Eduardo's attention was the pendant the woman wore over her neckline. It was an extraordinarily elaborate piece of jewelry, a gold cameo with pearl inlays that formed a distinctive floral design. The complexity of the craftsmanship and the evident quality of the materials suggested it was a unique piece, probably commissioned from a renowned jeweler. Eduardo frowned as he examined the pendant more closely. There was something familiar about its design, something that resonated in his family memory, but he couldn't identify exactly what it was. The woman in the photograph, according to family annotations, was Isabella Martinelli, his great-great-grandmother, wife of patriarch Giuseppe Martinelli, founder of the family commercial dynasty. Eduardo's perplexity intensified when he remembered family stories about the historical rivalry between the Martinellis and another family of Italian immigrants, the Rosinis, who had competed fiercely for control of the lucrative grain import and export business at the port of Buenos Aires during the first decades of the 20th century. This rivalry had deeply marked the family identity and was transmitted from generation to generation as a fundamental part of the family narrative. He decided to consult a specialist in historical jewelry to determine the origin and history of such a distinctive piece. The workshop of the historical jewelry specialist, Dr. Carmen Vidal, was located in the elegant Recoleta neighborhood, a few blocks from the cemetery where the most prominent families of Buenos Aires high society rest. The studio walls were decorated with display cases exhibiting Argentine jewelry pieces from the 19th and 20th centuries, creating a private museum that documented the evolution of goldsmith art in the country. Dr. Vidal, a 60-year-old woman with decades of experience in authenticating historical jewelry, examined the photograph under a specialized high-resolution magnifying glass. Her initial expression of professional interest gradually transformed into evident surprise that she couldn't completely hide. "This pendant," murmured the specialist, adjusting the lighting of her desk lamp, "presents very specific characteristics that make it extraordinarily distinctive. The work of the central cameo, the arrangement of pearls in cluster form, and particularly these small diamonds that flank the floral design. All of this suggests the hand of a specific master jeweler." The technical analysis revealed fascinating details about the piece. The setting technique used was characteristic of the Italian style transplanted to Buenos Aires during the first decade of the 20th century. The materials employed, 18-karat gold, cultured pearls from the Rio de la Plata, and small diamonds probably imported from Europe, indicated that it was a high economic value commission. But most revealing was the discovery of an almost imperceptible goldsmith's mark on the back of the cameo, visible only under extreme magnification. The mark corresponded to A. Benedetti, Buenos Aires, 1906, a renowned Italian jeweler established on Florida Street, who had been the favorite of the most prosperous families of the Italian colony in Buenos Aires. Dr. Vidal consulted her professional archives, which included historical records of commissions made by prominent jewelers of the early 20th century. What she found generated profound perplexity. According to Benedetti's records, this specific pendant had been commissioned in November 1906 by Vittorio Rossini, patriarch of the Martinelli's rival family. The commission had been registered as nuptial pendant for Miss Rossini, which suggested the piece had been created as a wedding gift for a woman from the Rossini family. However, the photograph clearly showed Isabella Martinelli wearing this jewel in 1907. This contradiction raised fundamental questions. How had a jewel commissioned by the rival family come into Isabella Martinelli's hands? Was it a theft, a purchase, or was there a more complex explanation that could rewrite the history of the rivalry between both families? The investigation moved to the General Archive of the Argentine nation, located in the Barracas neighborhood, where immigration records and commercial documents that document the arrival and establishment of immigrant families in Buenos Aires during the period of great European immigration are preserved. These archives would contain the keys to understanding the historical context of the rivalry between the Martinellis and the Rossinis. Immigration records revealed that both families had arrived in Argentina on the same ship, the steamship Regina Margarita, which had departed from the port of Genoa in September 1894, bound for Buenos Aires. Giuseppe Martinelli and Vittorio Rossini, both 28 years old, had traveled with their respective families in search of commercial opportunities in the prosperous Argentine market of the early 20th century. During the 18-day transatlantic voyage, the two families had developed a friendship that deepened during the first months in Buenos Aires. Documents show that they initially collaborated in establishing a small Italian product import business, operating from a modest location in the La Boca neighborhood near the port. However, commercial records from the Buenos Aires Stock Exchange document how this initial partnership gradually transformed into fierce rivalry. In 1898, the partners separated due to disagreements about business expansion toward the lucrative grain trade. Giuseppe Martinelli favored a strategy of gradual growth and consolidation, while Vittorio Rossini advocated for aggressive expansion that included significant debt to acquire larger port facilities. The commercial break was formalized in March 1899 when both established competing companies, Martinelli Brothers Importers and Rossini and Company Commercial Exporters. From that moment, records show intense commercial competition that included disputes over exclusive contracts with grain producers from the Argentine Pampas, legal battles over port concessions, and a price war that significantly affected the profitability of both companies. Documents from the Commercial Court of Buenos Aires reveal multiple cross-lawsuits between 1900 and 1906, including accusations of commercial sabotage, industrial espionage, and unfair competition. This rivalry had transcended the commercial sphere to become a personal enmity that defined the social identity of both families within the Italian colony of Buenos Aires. However, the records also revealed an intriguing detail. In 1906, the same year Vittorio Rossini commissioned the Pendant, both families had participated in secret negotiations mediated by the Italian Chamber of Commerce to resolve their disputes and establish a commercial truce that would benefit the entire Italian community. The investigation required testimony from descendants of the Rossini family to understand their perspective on the historical rivalry and particularly to obtain information about the pendant commissioned by their ancestor. After locating through contemporary genealogical records, contact was established with Maria Elena Rossini, 73 years old, great-granddaughter of Vittorio Rossini and guardian of family memory. Maria Elena lived in an elegant residence in the Belgrano neighborhood, decorated with family photographs and objects that testified to the prosperity the Rossini family had achieved during the 20th century. Her memory of family stories was extraordinarily detailed, transmitted through decades of family gatherings where elders recounted the deeds of immigrant ancestors. The rivalry with the Martinellis, explained Maria Elena, with a mixture of nostalgia and sadness, was our family's tragedy. My great-grandfather Vittorio always said they had been like brothers during the voyage from Italy, but that ambition had destroyed that brotherhood. However, we always suspected there was more to the story than what we were told. The most revealing testimony referred specifically to the pendant. Maria Elena remembered fragmentary stories about Aunt Giulia's lost jewel, the younger sister of Vittorio Rossini. According to family narratives transmitted orally, Giulia Rossini had mysteriously disappeared in 1907, taking with her a valuable nuptial pendant that her brother had commissioned as a wedding gift. My great-grandfather never spoke directly about what happened to Aunt Giulia, continued Maria Elena. We only knew that she had left Buenos Aires suddenly and that her name had become a family taboo. For decades, when any grandchild asked about her, the elders would change the subject or simply say she had returned to Italy. Family records preserved by Maria Elena included partial correspondence between Vittorio Rossini and relatives in Italy, dated between 1907 and 1910. In these letters, written in an archaic Genoese dialect, cryptic references were found to Giulia's dishonor and the betrayal that broke two families forever. A particularly revealing letter dated April 1908 contained the phrase, "Giulia has chosen love over family honor, and now we must live with the consequences of her decision. The pendant I commissioned to celebrate her wedding has become the symbol of our shame." This testimony suggested that Giulia Rossini had been involved in some type of romantic scandal that had intensified the rivalry between the families. The presence of the pendant in Isabella Martinelli's photograph began to acquire a completely new dimension. It wasn't a theft or a purchase, but possibly a personal connection between the rival families that had been carefully hidden for more than a century. To fully understand the implications of the pendant mystery, it was necessary to examine the social and cultural context of Buenos Aires in 1907, an era of accelerated transformation that defined the social rules within which Italian immigrant families operated. Argentina of the early 20th century was experiencing extraordinary economic growth driven by agricultural exports, which had created unprecedented opportunities for ambitious European immigrants. Buenos Aires society of 1907 was characterized by a rigid but permeable social structure, where successful immigrant families could ascend economically but faced significant cultural barriers to their integration into the traditional Argentine elite. Within the Italian colony specifically, there were internal hierarchies based on commercial success, region of origin in Italy, and the ability to maintain cultural traditions while adapting to Argentine life. In this context, commercial rivalries between immigrant families acquired dimensions that transcended the purely economic. They became disputes over social prestige, recognition within the Italian community, and the right to lead the cultural and charitable organizations that constituted the core of immigrant social life. Family honor, a fundamental concept in southern Italian culture of the era, dictated that commercial disputes extend to all aspects of social life. Marriages were planned strategically to strengthen commercial alliances. Children were educated to continue family businesses, and women fulfilled specific roles as guardians of family reputation and mediators in social conflicts. In 1907, the social rules governing relationships between rival families were inflexible. Marriages between members of enemy families were considered unforgivable betrayals that could result in complete social ostracism. Women who defied these norms faced particularly severe consequences: loss of family economic support, exclusion from the Italian community, and the impossibility of returning to Italy without also dishonoring relatives who had remained in the home country. Buenos Aires of 1907 also offered opportunities for anonymity and reinvention that didn't exist in the Italian towns of origin. A woman who broke with family expectations could theoretically create a new social identity, especially if she had access to independent economic resources or the support of a well-to-do family willing to defy social conventions. In this context, the presence of the Rossini pendant in Isabella Martinelli's photograph suggested a social drama of extraordinary proportions that would have challenged all established norms and would have required extensive family complicity to remain hidden for more than a century. The search for answers led to the civil registry of the city of Buenos Aires, where official documents of births, marriages, and deaths that constitute the legal memory of the Buenos Aires population are preserved. In these archives, meticulously organized since the federalization of Buenos Aires in 1880, the official records that could confirm or refute suspicions about a romantic connection between the rival families would be found. The investigation focused on 1907 records, specifically searching for documents related to Giulia Rossini and Isabella Martinelli. The first significant discovery was Isabella Martinelli's marriage certificate dated March 15, 1907, which registered her as the wife of Giuseppe Martinelli, confirming traditional family information. However, a more exhaustive search revealed an extraordinary document that would completely change the understanding of the family mystery. In the 1907 death records appeared Giulia Rossini de Martinelli, deceased on September 3, 1907, at 24 years of age from childbirth complications. The document indicated she had been the wife of Giuseppe Martinelli, merchant, and had given birth to a daughter registered as Isabella Martinelli. This information revealed a completely unexpected truth. Isabella Martinelli, the woman in the photograph wearing the Rossini pendant, was not Giuseppe Martinelli's original wife, but his second wife. Giulia Rossini had been Giuseppe's first wife and had died giving birth to a daughter who bore the same name that would appear later in family records. An additional search in the records revealed that Giuseppe Martinelli had contracted a second marriage on November 20th, 1907, barely 2 months after Giulia's death, with Isabella Laconti, a 22-year-old young woman whose family had arrived from Naples in 1904. To avoid family and social confusion, Isabella Laconti had adopted the name of the deceased first wife, officially becoming Isabella Martinelli. This discovery completely recontextualized the 1907 photograph. The pendant that Isabella wore was not a stolen or purchased piece, but an object inherited from Giuseppe's first wife, who had been a member of the rival family. The commercial rivalry between Martinelli and Rossini had been complicated and possibly intensified by a secret marriage that had united the two enemy families. Giulia Rossini's death during childbirth had deprived both families of the opportunity for reconciliation, and her memory had been carefully erased from official narratives to preserve both the Rossini's honor and the social legitimacy of Giuseppe Martinelli's second marriage. With the documentary information confirmed, it was possible to reconstruct the chronology of the secret romance that had united the rival families and that had been carefully hidden for more than a century. This reconstruction revealed an extraordinary human drama that had transpired parallel to the public commercial rivalry, adding complex emotional dimensions to what had been remembered as a simple business dispute. The romance between Giuseppe Martinelli and Giulia Rossini would have probably begun in late 1905 or early 1906, at the height of the commercial rivalry between their families. Family testimonies and commercial records suggest that both young people would have met during the truce negotiations mediated by the Italian Chamber of Commerce, where they would have represented their respective families as heirs to the family businesses. The commissioning of the pendant by Vittorio Rossini in November 1906 acquires completely new meaning in this context. It wasn't a conventional wedding gift, but a piece destined to celebrate his sister's secret marriage to the heir of the rival family. The complexity and cost of the jewel reflected both Vittorio's fraternal love toward Giulia and his hope that this marriage could eventually reconcile the enemy families. The secret marriage would have required complex logistics to avoid social scandal. Records suggest that Giuseppe and Giulia married in a private ceremony, possibly in a parish outside Buenos Aires, with the connivance of progressive members of both families who saw in this union an opportunity for family peace. During the first months of 1907, Giulia would have lived discreetly as Giuseppe's wife, maintaining her Rossini identity in public while gradually establishing her home in the neighborhood where the Martinellis resided. The pregnancy, evident by mid-1907, would have complicated the situation by making the public revelation of their marriage inevitable. Giulia's death in September 1907 would have devastated the family reconciliation plans. Giuseppe, widowed with a newborn daughter, and facing renewed hostility from the Rossinis, who blamed the Martinellis for their daughter and sister's death, would have needed to quickly find a solution for his family and social situation. The marriage to Isabella Conti, barely 2 months later, represented both a practical necessity, a mother for his orphaned daughter, and a social strategy to normalize his situation. The decision for Isabella to adopt the name of the deceased first wife would have been a way to honor Giulia's memory while avoiding complicated explanations about the circumstances of the first marriage. The secret of the forbidden romance and hidden marriage between Giuseppe Martinelli and Giulia Rossini had profound consequences that extended through subsequent generations of both families, creating patterns of behavior, family silences, and resentments that would endure for decades without descendants fully understanding their origins. In the Martinelli family, the secret generated a complex family narrative where Isabella Conti, the second wife, was presented as Giuseppe's only legitimate wife. Giulia Rossini's daughter, also named Isabella, grew up believing that Isabella Conti was her biological mother. This confusion of identities was maintained until Giuseppe's death in 1923, when some private family documents partially revealed the existence of a first marriage, although without specifying the first wife's identity. The partial truth created significant family tensions. Isabella Conti's children felt threatened in their social legitimacy upon discovering that there was an older half-sister with potentially superior inheritance rights. Isabella, Giulia Rossini's daughter, experienced an identity crisis upon understanding that the woman she had known as mother was not her biological parent, and that her true family origin was shrouded in mystery and apparent shame. In the Rossini family, the impact was equally traumatic but manifested differently. Giulia's death was interpreted as a fatal betrayal. She had abandoned her family for the enemy and had paid with her life. Vittorio Rossini, devastated by the loss of his beloved sister and by the feeling of having been betrayed by the Martinellis, intensified his commercial rivalry to levels of personal obsession. Rossini descendants inherited a family narrative where Giulia was presented as a victim of seduction and manipulation by the Martinellis. This version of events fed generations of resentment and justified the perpetuation of commercial rivalry far beyond the original economic reasons. The pendant, preserved by Isabella Conti and transmitted through the Martinelli generations, became an ambiguous symbol. For the Martinellis, it represented the elegance and good taste of their founding matriarch. For the Rossinis, when they occasionally saw it at social gatherings of the Italian colony, it represented a painful reminder of their lost sister and family betrayal. For decades, both families participated in social events of the Italian community, where they crossed paths regularly, maintaining superficial courtesy that hid deep resentments whose real origin many descendants didn't fully understand. Marriages, businesses, and friendships were carefully planned to avoid associations with the rival family, perpetuating an enmity whose emotional roots had been lost in time. In 2024, when Edoardo Martinelli shared the investigation findings with Maria Elena Rossini, the revelation of the truth about the pendant and the forbidden romance generated complex reactions that reflected how family secrets can influence intergenerational relationships for more than a century, even when contemporary generations don't fully understand the origins of their inherited family prejudices. The first meeting between Edoardo and Maria Elena took place in a cafe in the San Telmo neighborhood, neutral territory that didn't symbolically favor either family. The presentation of documentary, photographic, and testimonial evidence initially created tense silence, followed by a series of emotions that oscillated between surprise, sadness, and finally a sense of liberation. "Throughout my life," reflected Maria Elena with tears in her eyes, "I felt an inexplicable antipathy toward the Martinellis, without really understanding why our parents and grandparents transmitted this enmity to us as if it were part of our family identity, but they could never clearly explain to us what had happened to justify so much resentment." Edoardo experienced a similar revelation. "We also inherited this automatic rivalry. At Italian colony meetings, we instinctively avoided the Rossinis, and when someone mentioned doing business with them, my father would make a disgusted face and say you couldn't trust that family, but he never explained why." Understanding that the rivalry had been intensified by tragic love rather than created by simple commercial competition transformed both descendants' perspective on their shared family history. Giulia Rossini and Giuseppe Martinelli had attempted to unite the families through love, but the historical and social circumstances of 1907 had turned their romance into a tragedy that permanently divided the families. The descendants decided to organize an extended family meeting, including members of both families who resided in Buenos Aires and other Argentine cities. The revelation of the centennial secret generated diverse reactions. Some members experienced relief in finally understanding the origin of inexplicable family tensions, while others felt sadness for the opportunities of friendship and collaboration that had been lost for decades due to a historical misunderstanding. A joint memorial was established to honor Giulia Rossini's memory and recognize the love that had attempted to overcome family rivalry. The 1907 pendant, which had remained in Martinelli possession for more than a century, was donated to an Italian immigration museum in Buenos Aires, where it is exhibited alongside the complete story of the forbidden romance and contemporary family reconciliation. The two families, finally united by understanding their shared history, established annual meeting traditions and began exploring commercial collaboration opportunities that would have honored Giulia and Giuseppe's original dreams. The investigation of the 1907 pendant was completed with a transformed understanding of how family objects can contain stories of love, loss, and reconciliation that transcend official narratives transmitted from generation to generation. What had begun as a consultation about an apparently anachronistic piece of jewelry had become the rediscovery of a romance that had challenged the social conventions of its era, and whose legacy had secretly influenced family relationships for more than a century. Dr. Carmen Vidal documented the case as a paradigmatic example of how material objects can serve as keys to unveiling hidden family stories. Her report, published in the Argentine Journal of Jewelry History, established new standards for researching pieces with complex family provenance and demonstrated the importance of combining technical analysis with documentary and testimonial research. For the Martinelli and Rossini families, the experience had been transformative on multiple levels. Eduardo and Maria Elena became co-custodians of a family history that had been richer and more complex than any of their ancestors had imagined. Now when I look at photographs of my great-grandparents, reflected Eduardo, I don't see just successful merchants, but people capable of loving beyond the social conventions of their era. The pendant, exhibited at the Italian Immigration Museum of Buenos Aires, became a symbol of how love can transcend family and social rivalry. The explanatory plaque tells the complete story from Vittorio Rossini's romantic commission for his sister, through the secret marriage that attempted to unite the enemy families, to the tragedy that intensified their separation, and the eventual reconciliation of their descendants in the 21st century. The story of Giulia Rossini and Giuseppe Martinelli resonated in the Italian community of Buenos Aires as a reminder that behind the most entrenched family rivalries can exist stories of love and sacrifice that time had hidden. Several immigrant families began re-examining their own photographs and inherited objects, wondering what secrets might be waiting to be discovered. The case also generated significant academic impact. The University of Buenos Aires established a research program on family objects as historical sources, using the Martinelli and Rossini pendant as a foundational case study. Students of history, anthropology, and sociology learned techniques to combine material analysis with documentary and testimonial research. For Eduardo Martinelli and Maria Elena Rossini, the investigation had created not only a personal friendship, but also a professional collaboration. They decided to establish a consultancy specialized in family history research for other immigrant families who wished to better understand their origins and resolve similar family mysteries. The 1907 pendant, which for more than a century had been simply a beautiful piece of jewelry and family photographs, had revealed itself as the silent witness to one of the most powerful love stories of Italian immigration in Argentina. In its carefully set pearls and delicately carved cameo, the complete story could now be read, that of a love that defied social conventions, a tragedy that separated families, and a reconciliation that demonstrated that truth, however delayed, always has the power to heal the wounds of the past. The photograph of Isabella Martinelli wearing the Rossini pendant was no longer just a period portrait, but the visual document of a moment in time when love had managed, however briefly, to overcome the barriers that separated two families. In her elegant posture and serene gaze, Isabella carried not only an extraordinary jewel, but also the legacy of a woman who had died for love and whose memory, finally rescued from oblivion, had managed to unite what rivalry had separated for more than 100 years.